Revenge with Karen. He tapped his glass twice sharp and prepared, and the room fell silent like a courtroom after a guilty sentence. Even before the steak had cooled, the self-congratulations had begun. He made a brief announcement, his voice smooth as bourbon and full of backslap charm. A watershed moment has occurred tonight. We are moving away from myths and towards profits. Laughter. Applause. Forks clinking against wine glasses in an early version of The Last Supper never looked at me. I sat at the far end of the table with the same linen napkin and pricey wine, but you'd swear I was the intern taking leftovers. There was no name card or introduction, only a nod from the event planner who mistook me for someone's +1. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that what they were celebrating, the product, the architecture, the scaling logic, the code scaffolding, and the zero downtime migration procedure had almost become a catchphrase. I built it. Every damn line. From the first whiteboard scribbling in an unheated co-working area to the demo that earned us a Series B, my fingerprints were buried at the root of everything. And now I was sitting there munching dry steak while they toasted away from myths as if I were a ghost. Marcus, the CTO, who couldn't debug a login loop without first Google, sat 5 chairs down, smirking as if he had just solved cancer. He winked at me once with that smug, "We know the truth, look," and I almost stood up and flipped the table. But I did not. I smiled. I applauded. I took another sip of the awful red blend that a junior associate chose because the label had a falcon, and I watched them toast to the future they believed they had made. My phone vibrated, pinging the group Slack channel. #exec chooses excellent angle of the founders. Founders. There it was. He cropped only our frame. Like a dreadful memory that they couldn't erase. Only use filters and large checks to edge out. I went outside and smoked. I do not even smoke, but I needed air. Standing there under those ridiculous string lights that are always hung at these events to make the atmosphere feel more intimate. I saw my reflection in the tinted window. My eyes didn't look right. Not sad. Not angry. Just left. 6 years of skipped birthdays, 3 a.m. Fire drills, missed funerals, and dress ulcers. I once programmed an emergency patch from the ER while my Roman iFool beeped like a madman's metronome. And for what so Allen and partnerships can wear Yeezys and claim we're a product-led organization without choking on irony? I don't remember walking back inside. I just recall the CEO laughing too loudly as if he knew he had already gotten away with something. The board member next to him raised a question. I didn't catch what, but I did get the response. Yeah, the entire early team was gritty. Good intuition, but now is the time for specialists. My fork hit the plate harder than I intended. Several heads turned. I smiled again, that fake HR-friendly smile I'd been cultivating since they hired culture coaches. And that was when the first seed germinated. That was the moment. Not after they shoved me out. Not until I discovered the ledger. Not even during the call that brought everything crashing down. No. It was right there over charred steak under the fairy lights with some moron toasting myths and forgetting the primary reason he had anything to toast at all. You cannot eliminate a ghost by pretending it does not exist. You simply give it a reason to haunt. The invitation arrived at 6:12 a.m. sharp. Subject line quicksync calendar hold. No context. There's no agenda. There are no pleasantries. Only 3 names were on the call. Me, HR, and legal. It's like receiving an envelope in the mail with black tape on it. No matter what's inside, it's not good. I showed up nevertheless, still in my hoodie with half a cup of coffee and a half-drained soul. I could smell the boilerplate HR breath even before I clicked join. You know the tone. Empathetic but detached. As if they had just read a BuzzFeed post titled, "How to Fire a Human Without Crying." Daisy from HR smiled as if she were about to inform me that my dog had died peacefully in its sleep. We're having a realignment, she explained. A strategic restructure. I blinked. Once. Twice. That was their favorite term recently. Realignment. Not a layoff, not firings, just a simple chiropractic tweak for the company's human backbone. She continued chatting. I tuned her out in the same way you would a lousy podcast advertisement. Legal was present, nodding quietly like a bobblehead attached to a tax form. When she had finished talking, she dropped it. A severance package slipped into my email like a dirty napkin. 3 months' salary. accelerated vesting of some of my remaining equity, health insurance to the conclusion of the quarter, and one small clause was tucked neatly on page 5 like a tick behind the ear. Waiver of all future employment pay or equity claims. Oh, there it was. Howard offered a handshake. They offered me hush money. Not much, but enough to make you think. To make you consider letting it all go, simply sign the document, go out the back door, and if nothing happened. But this is the section that triggered the internal fire alarm. I had not been underperforming. I hadn't missed any deliverables. I hadn't broken a rule, burned a bridge, or raised a red flag. I was still delivering on every measure they cared about. Quietly and repeatedly, I was the metric. So why now? Why? So suddenly. Why is this unusually elegant departure route padded with legal lavender and corporate empathy? I said the only thing I could without revealing my hand. I will take some time to review. Claire's smile wobbled slightly around the corners. Legal nodded softly as if he knew the game had just been extended by an extra inning. No problem, she replied. Please get back to us by Friday. She did not ask whether I had any questions. She didn't ask how I felt since it didn't matter. What mattered was that I leave before I asked them any questions. I ended the call, sat there staring at the offer, read it. Reread it. Scan the metadata from the PDF created 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks. They had planned this before the toast, perhaps even before launch. My hands shook, but not with wrath. Not yet. It was something colder. Silence inside that begins at the base of your spine and grows like mold. I did not go back to work that day. I did not answer to Slack. I did not check my Jira tickets. Instead, I opened a blank document and began comparing words and clauses. And that's when I realized the absence. Not in what they provided me, but in what they left out. There was no mention of my entire equity ledger, no breakdown, no cap table. Just a vague reference to outstanding stock on usual terms. It was like receiving a menu with no prices and being asked to hand over your wallet regardless. They did not want to reimburse me. They intended to eliminate me. But I was not signing anything, not until I realized exactly what they were trying to hide. It was 2:17 a.m., and my ceiling fan was making that broken, slow-blade helicopter noise again, the same rhythm as my thoughts circling, grinding, and refusing to die. I could not sleep, not after the severance offer, not after the unexpected HR ambush, the strangely warm grin, and the legal provision that smelled like month-old shrimp beneath a radiator. So I did what I used to do during my early startup days. I opened my laptop and delved right into the programming shared folders and digital bones of the firm we created. I wasn't sure what I was searching for. Perhaps a version history. Maybe you missed an email. Perhaps this is just proof that the last 6 years of my life were not what I had imagined. The Dropbox folder structure had not altered significantly. Still a jumble of obscure acronyms, abandoned quarterly reports, and forgotten pitch decks titled New Final 2, PPTX. But deep inside one of the folders was labeled, Finance Temp Do Not Use. This is where the juiciest trash always lives. I saw a document that was timestamped 4 days ago. I clicked on Cap Table RevOps Final Signed XLSX. It took a second to load, which was most likely due to the rush of blood to my ears. I scrolled over the logo, legal header, and partner allocations. Then I paused and scrolled again and again. Row by row. Founders' names, angel investors, preferred stock convertible notes represent phantom shares. But not me. My name is my first and last initials with an alias. The previous email address was no longer available. Not misspelled, not moved, not being reviewed. Gone, as if I had never existed. It was like seeing your own obituary spring up while you were still alive. I just sat there looking as if blinking would make my name show. Maybe it was just a terrible dream, a filter toggle, or a permissions issue. But the math added up. The dilution did not. There were new entries, names I didn't recognize. Holding slivers of equity that were once mine hadn't just cut me off emotionally, they had financially erased me. It wasn't simply ego. This wasn't just a passive-aggressive slide in a board meeting or a missed shout-out in the product launch announcement. This was theft. Premeditated, quiet, paper is clean. They probably cooperated over the same artisanal coffee while discussing elevating the brand, and it had already been signed. I verified the file metadata. It was uploaded from Marcus's computer. Marcus, who previously referred to me as the Code Whisperer, required me to resolve a merge disagreement at 11 p.m. before a board demonstration. Marcus, who had not spoken to me since the investor dinner. A fury struck me so fiercely that I felt it in my molars. This was not simply betrayal, it was orchestrated. A surgical extraction, like I was a cyst that needed to be quietly removed before the corpse was sold. I could feel my heart pounding against my ribs when I opened the initial cap table from 3 months earlier. I had preserved one as a precautionary measure. The side-by-side contrast was disgusting. My stake had been reassigned, folded into a pool. Then it was broken up and distributed as party gifts to junior executives who most likely assumed the rear end was a yoga stance. Here's the kicker. The diluting clause. That requires my signed agreement for any share redistribution. There is no trace of it being triggered. There is no email request. There is no DocuSign ping. No Slack message. Nothing, because they never asked. Because they knew I would say no. Because they assumed I would never check. I sat back in my chair. The glow of the monitor painted my face like a horror film revelation. My jaw was clenched so tightly that I believed a molar may break. They had removed me from the ledger of my own stupid effort. But I wasn't just a ghost waiting to be swept out of the books. They forgot an important aspect of mythology. They do not die softly. By 7 a.m., the sun was rising, and I hadn't slept a single second. I was still in the same chair, same hoodie, same hollow chest, looking at 2 cap tables side by side as if they were before and after crime scene photographs. Only one thing had changed me. Erased. Absorbed, reissued, forgotten. However, forgetting me was their first mistake. Second, I underestimated how meticulous I can be when I stop giving a damn. So I opened the vault. Not a genuine vault, just a dusty personal folder on my cloud storage containing anything that ever seemed weird. Saved emails. Contracts are old. I downloaded Slack exports before upgrading to Enterprise. Legal PDFs from the early days when we didn't even have a lawyer and simply researched our way through Delaware C Corp forms. All of it. That's when I noticed it. Section 6C addresses equity dilution rights. No dilution transfer or reassignment of equity may occur without the holder's signed and time-stamped consent. That was me. I was the holder. Capital H, I have full control over my inbox. No documentary signs, no alerts. No signatures, not even a passive-aggressive simply looping you into the thread. Nothing. They did not ask. They did not warn. They just did it. I began compiling. One by one, like weaving razor wire through a bridal bouquet. In year 2, the CEO sent an email saying, "Do not worry, your equity is locked and safe." There are no tricks here. Marcus bragging in Slack as captured in a screenshot. Founders preserve their shares unless they completely destroy the place. The onboarding document was lawful when it was simply a freelancer named Kyle. The equity condition is non-negotiable, and there is a permanent HR message from the previous quarter. When I inquired about any planned changes to shareholder distribution and received a single emoji person letter, I archived everything, including printed copies, encrypted backups, and an off-site mirror. If they tried to destroy the servers, I would still have the ashes. My laptop fan was wheezing from the weight of the receipts, but I didn't mind. Then I accessed Gmail, which is not my work email. My genuine one, the one connected to nothing. No LinkedIn. Data brokers. No company tentacles. I entered 2 words into the 2 fields. Helena Esquire, a friend of a friend. Corporate litigator, razor sharp. Despises crap, subject line, quiet inquiry, recontract breach. I've included 5 documents with no summary fury rant or sob story, just facts, dates, terms, missing signatures, and 1 line in the email body requesting confirmation of the breach. There is no action yet, only visibility. I pressed send. I shut the laptop. I did not text anyone. I did not call. I didn't shout into the void on Twitter or share obscure LinkedIn platitudes about perseverance. I didn't even show up at work. I simply went outside, sat on my porch with a black coffee, and listened to the world go on as if nothing had happened, because that's the thing about revenge. Loudness indicates sloppiness. If anything moves quickly, it can be tracked. But if it's slow, methodical, lawful, dull, or even slides under your skin like a splinter, they'll have no idea it's coming. not until it was too late to react. It began as a whisper with Slack threads lighting up after hours meetings magically disappearing from calendars and the CFO suddenly developing a spine during budget approvals. That kind of strain only emerges for two reasons, lawsuits or liquidity. And it smelled like money. By Wednesday, the whispers had become sentences. Do you hear about legacy companies sniffing around $400 million in all-cash zero earnings? These are the corporate dinosaurs that eat startups for breakfast and digest them in quarterly earnings presentations. They didn't buy the technology, they were buying positioning and branding buzz. And we became very buzzworthy. That's when the irony struck like a brick in the face. They had erased me in order to make the company appear as a sleek founder with little IP and a strong acquisition target, as if I were a rusted bolt in the chassis. But when you erase the one person who wrote half the damn thing, you are not cleaning the books, you are forging them. So I opened LinkedIn, not my account, but a clean one with no photo, no connections, and only a boring job title and a safe location. I typed slowly, and there he was, the head of M and a legacy company from North America. Gray hair, smug smile, and a Georgetown law degree hanging from his endorsements like a lanyard. I sent him a 5-sentence message with no fluff or accusation. You're probably already doing your due diligence on the company name. Please confirm that your counsel has evaluated the founder equity dilution terms and any missing consent papers pertaining to the Series C reorganization. A former stakeholder may have made serious oversights that have an impact on clear title to IP. I waited 3 hours before logging off and deleting the account that night. Our CEO requested an urgent sync with legal finance and Marcus. No agenda, no summary, just a red dot on everyone's calendar labeled prep diligence. Q&A. The next day, the Heritage Company's legal team filed a formal request through our investor rep for entire and unredacted founder vesting documentation dating back to incorporation, not just a summary, not a slide, the whole darn trail. That was when the terror set in and the internal chatter became frenetic. Legal created a new shared folder overnight. Half of the leadership team had their document review credentials terminated. Slack messages began disappearing mid-thread like terrified birds fleeing a wildfire. Then I received an email not from the company but from Legacy Co. as a courtesy outreach to previous officers and contributors, inviting me to a diligence call for historical clarification on early IP structuring. I was not supposed to be on their radar, but here I am. I responded 2 hours later, short and sweet, eager to help. Please copy my attorney on scheduling. The next morning, my lawyer Helena texted me the term leverage. We were not planning to sue. We were not going to shout. We were going to be necessary because the only thing acquisition teams despise more than unclean books is incomplete ownership. They would rather walk away than inherit a minefield, and I just lighted the flame gently and discreetly with a LinkedIn profile. No one would ever track me down. It no longer mattered what they took. It was about the things they couldn't sell without me. The shift was nearly subtle at first, like the first hairline fracture in a windshield before it spiderwebbed under pressure. Emails stopped flowing normally. Meeting invitations became tighter and smaller. All hands converted into selected hands. People who used to copy half the company on memos now respond privately to the CEO. He stopped smiling, then the war room opened. Naturally, they did not refer to it as such. They called it Strategic Deal Support HQ, but everyone knew it was a bunker, a sealed conference room on the 17th floor with fingerprint entry and blackout curtains, the kind of facility you create when the plane is leaking gasoline in midair and you're hoping no one notices the smoke yet. That same week, our typically absent general counsel was suddenly present in the office-rumpled suit, empty coffee cups and a haunted expression, as if he had just understood what personal liability actually meant. Late-night doc reviews, hushed phone calls, and continuous printer hums from behind shut doors. The word started spreading. The acquisition was not stalled, but it was also not moving forward. Legacy Co. needed transparency, a clean ownership chain, and unambiguous authorizations, which meant turning over every stone, including the ones they had buried me beneath. I didn't have to lift a finger. The truth was awakening on its own. Then, out of nowhere, I received a text message from someone I hadn't communicated with in months, not Helena or Legacy Co. My operations lead, just so you know, classified you as a Category 2 risk in the internal transaction briefing. The CFO looked like he had swallowed glass. Also, your Slack history has been retrieved. Complete archive. The compliance team is panicking out. Whatever you're doing is working. I stared at the screen for a moment. Lila had always been quiet, neutral, and too smart to take sides. But she'd seen it all, the late nights, the early builds, and how I was pushed further and more out of the narrative. She was breaking ranks to warn me. It indicated one thing: they were sweating. Not because of what I had done, but because of what I could still do. And then was when I felt it, a cold, crystalline sensation of control. The one you only get when you stop playing defense. I didn't have to divulge anything. There was no need to storm in waving contracts like a wild prophet. I already knew how things would turn out. They were the ones chasing signatures now. They were the ones collecting audit trails, scanning Slack outputs, and comparing versions of documents they assumed I'd forgotten. Every file I forwarded to Helena already matched the cleaned versions. Every provision I kept in my back pocket is now noticeably absent from theirs. And every person they'd given ownership to at my company was about to become a burden on a ledger they couldn't wipe. I did not text Lila back, gloated, or hinted. I simply stood up, brewed a cup of tea, and opened my calendar. The diligence call was in 3 days. My formal invitation was lying in my email with the Legacy Comer logo at the top. My name appears neat and proper. The founding technical officer IP contributor had the identical name, which did not appear on their internal cap table. Let them squirm. I had waited this long. I could wait for a bit longer. The final call was set at 10 a.m. Friday was sharp and formal, with the ceremonial tension of a wedding and the concealed panic of a burial. The invitation arrived in my email like a ghost's fingerprint. Subject line: Legacy Co. The acquisition final diligence call to all stakeholders was there. My name in plain text, not buried in CC hell, not slapped on as an afterthought, just standing there on its own, like it used to when my signature represented progress. I am the founder technical officer, and my monitoring of intellectual property structure is clean. True, irrefutable. I read it 3 times like an obituary concluding with a resurrection. No one from the company reached out. No emails, pings, or soft hey. Simply FYI, you're on the call messages from the CEO's assistant. Of course not. He probably didn't know yet, and I made certain of it. Legacy Company. They brought me in directly, not via them, not because of them, because they wanted the one person who could confirm whether the company they were buying had actually constructed what it claimed, or had simply changed enough signatures to make it appear so. That morning, I did not prepare or rehearse. I simply waited. 9:55 a.m. I logged in silently. Camera turned off, microphone muted, a black square among suits, smiles, and 6-figure haircuts. The board was present. Our CFO looked like he had swallowed a broom. Eagle was doing that thing where they look off screen and pretend not to fear. The CEO then joined, smiling broadly and rolling up his sleeves as if he were preparing to sell everyone a dream. He did not notice me at first, not till 9:57. I saw it happen. His expression twitched briefly as he examined the participant list. Then he saw my name, not in the shadows, not anonymous, but official. You could see the mental math flashing across his eyes and felt the thinking: who invited her? Why is she here? What does she know? But the clock was ticking, and Legacy Covar does not wait. Not for discomfort, not for ghosts. At 9:59 a.m., I opened a fresh email. To Legacy Company. Legal. Helena is my lawyer and the company's general counsel. There was no subject or message body, just one attachment, the original vesting agreement signed, PDF dated initialed, and clause marked the same contract I signed 6 years ago when the company was simply whiteboards, ramen, and late-night sprints through AWS console logs. Before the CEO decided that a clean ledger was more important than a clean conscience, I clicked send and closed the window. Then I waited till 10 a.m. Legacy Co's VP of M&A began the call, pleasant and sharp. Before we proceed, please clarify the equity history and IP attributions. My camera remained off. My microphone stayed silent, but my name was loud. Halfway through the call, just as the CEO was about to launch into his usual symphony of spin synergies, scalable architecture, and organic user traction, Legacy Co's lead counsel, a woman named Eleanor with the kind of voice that can make billionaires sweat through custom tailoring cut in with surgical precision, Before we proceed with value finalization, she requested a short clarification on the cap table. Click. A shared screen emerged displaying a spreadsheet, one I'd seen before my ghost story in Excel format. She zoomed in. My name is not on your most recent ownership schedule, despite being one of the early IP suppliers. She stated it was slow and deliberate, not a question, a statement with a full chamber. The air became stuffy. You could feel the board members move in their seats. CFO began blinking like a broken Roomba. Legal froze and the CEO smiled. Too fast and too wide. Yes, he replied, clearing his throat. She was let go a few months ago on good terms. A strategic realignment. Her equity was redistributed using regular procedures. Eleanor repeated politely, as if she were testing the word for poison. She then clicked something. A new screen, new document. Founding vesting agreement signed PDF, the same one I sent. There's no subject. An hour before the call. Clause 6C was underlined in yellow, resembling a traffic sign before a cliff. Any equity dilution reassignment or modification requires the holder's prior written consent. Eleanor paused and then turned on her camera. Do you have a record of her written consent? The CEO blinked, once, twice. His throat moved as if he were swallowing gravel. Well, I would have to verify with legal. It might have been vocal. This is something that our staff manages. Eleanor lifted an eyebrow. Only one. Devastatingly calm. Verbal assent is not legally binding in equity restructuring, not under your own bylaws, not according to Delaware Code. We have reviewed the original agreement. Silence. Complete jaw-locked hush. It stretched. 8 seconds. 10. The kind of silence that grows with realization, that removes air from the room. The chairman of the board leaned closer, gazing at the screen as if the letters would rearrange themselves into something forgivable. The CFO took out his phone, attempting to pass it off as checking the weather, but his hands were shaking. Bad. The true gut hit came when Eleanor, still impossibly composed, flipped to the appendix. My signature was in black and white, dated. Witnessed, filed, no red lines. No ambiguity. There is no follow-up documentation indicating permission to anything. She looked back up. As calm as a noose, so again. Just to be clear, your team proceeded with equity reassignment in direct contradiction with this clause. You could hear the CEO's single backpedal. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. I saw it happen in real time. The unwinding. The knowledge that not only had they been apprehended, but that everyone on the call now knew it. The myth wasn't merely true. It was in the room, and someone attempted to kill it for components. Eleanor did not need to raise her voice. She just folded her hands in front of her and said the phrase that every CEO fears more than an IRS audit. We'll have to stop due diligence until this is handled. The screen did not turn dark, but it might as well have. You could feel the temperature dropping through the screen. The board chairman's jaw constricted like a vice. The CFO's face changed the hue of printer paper. The person on their side neglected to mute before whispering, "Holy shit." The CEO attempted to salvage it. Of course he did. They mentioned something about interpretation, flexible vesting language, and internal miscommunication, but by then he was simply shoveling sand into a crater. Legacy Co's squad is silent. They were already creating an investigative checklist in their brains. I did not speak, did not need to. In the gallery view, I still appeared as a black square. There are no facial expressions to parse, a voice to respond to. It was simply a presence that they couldn't erase, minimize, or spin. Eleanor wrapped it up neatly 3 minutes later. Thank you, everyone. We will contact you once legal clarity is established. Click. The meeting ended exactly like that. I sat down for a time. There is no celebration. There's no rush of adrenaline. Just a lengthy exhale like after a fire alarm goes off and you realize you've been clenching your teeth the whole time. Then Helena called. She stated that the normal breach notification will be sent out today. We will include damages, legal fees, and a clawback review. You will have it in writing by noon. I said thanks. Nothing more because it wasn't about the money anymore. It was about weight. My name had been deleted from a spreadsheet, but it still echoed in law rooms. It mattered. Not because I requested it, but because the truth eventually emerged wrapped in documentation. At 1:42 p.m., a board member I hadn't spoken with in years, one of the early investors from when we were only 5 individuals in a pitch deck, wrote me a message, short and hesitant. "Can we speak?" I did not respond. Instead, I closed my laptop, went to the kitchen, and poured 2 fingers of scotch into the same chipped mug that we used to sign our first term sheet. I went outside, leaned against the railing, and looked at nothing in particular. Then I raised the mug and murmured it to myself, not loudly or in front of others. "To myths," I replied. "They survive longer than CEOs." Big appreciation to the old office legends. Subscribe to keep the switch-flipping chaos going. Your ex-boss is shaking in his loafers.